What's up, guys? NWE War Reports here with the 12th of April 2023 frontline update for the Russo Ukrainian War. This is going to be just a quick update on the situations inside of Bakhmut. Last we talked about here, the Ukrainians, or the Russians for that matter, actually made a pretty strong attack moving into this high rise sector down here in the south. Inside of this circle here, they had captured most of it, but then the Ukrainian side launched a desperate last minute counterattack that succeeded in recapturing a school along with a post office and several of these high rise buildings. This was a very important event. Should this bottom corner of Bakhmut fall, it kind of gives the Russians direct access to the Ukrainian rear, including their supply lines. This is actually the top of a hill right here. This area in between is a downward slope and a valley, and then this is another hill up here. So should the Russians have succeeded in capturing and holding this area, it would have given them a direct line of sight over everything in this region right here. And this is all the supplies, supply roads, and everything coming into Bakhmut. This could have been the end for Ukraine right here. At the moment, and according to some of these intelligence reports that are floating around, Ukraine does hold the high ground on both sides of this area here. So the neck, what we're calling it, in between Romove, Ivanivsky, the high ground. There's a hill. There's a hill essentially in this area here, and there's another hill in this area here. Wherever that high ground is where the Ukrainian positions are. So we've speculated in the past and perhaps even made some statements on it. If we have, I was wrong on their statements. Ukraine does hold the high ground, and Russia does not have a direct line of sight over the roads leading into Bakhmut. They know generally where they are, and they hit them with artillery, but the artillery is sporadic. It can probably only be directed by drones and such. So, Ukraine is able to leak supplies into Bakhmut at this point. But should the Russians advance any more on the flanks and have the capability of direct line of sight of these roads, they can put spotters up, and essentially any time a vehicle is moving across them, they could, um, you know, strike at that exact moment with a bit more accuracy. So one of the big revelations from those leaked intelligence documents. In terms of the rail yard, the Russians did launch an assault and captured these areas here, including the Bakhmut rail station in the center. The Russians actually did manage to capture this industrial zone here as well. And then the Ukrainians immediately launched a counteroffensive and forced them out of this area, which is a big success on the part of the Ukrainian side. Should the Russians establish control over this, I believe is a grain elevator, they'll easily be able to start moving in to this residential neighborhood, which offers a lot less resistance than the industrial zones and then the high rises do. So, successful counterattack on behalf of Ukraine there. A similar story here in the south. The Russians managed to move into this zone as well, and the Ukrainians then forced them out. In fact, the Ukrainians are still fighting in the area, and it's possible that the Bakhmut railroad station here could change hands again. So we'll see. We'll see about that. Real quick here, just a few minutes to gloss over these intelligence documents, and like I said, for anyone on YouTube wanting to censor or moderate this, I am not going to show these documents. I have no intention on ending up on any kind of DC government list. Um, they've deemed this stuff top secret. The intelligence apparatus is very upset over the release of these things. I am not going to contribute to that fact. I will gloss over some of the topics that have already been talked about on news media because it's a free country, freedom of speech. This is public information now at this point. But the main thing I want to clarify is my position on the validity of these documents. I had initially believed that they might have been faked by U.S. intelligence to potentially sell some kind of story to the Russians and goad them into doing something. I no longer believe that. I do believe these are legitimate. There was over 100 documents in total that ended up being released. Among those documents was intelligence briefings on other countries that had nothing to do with the war in Russia and Ukraine. There's also potentially some spying that was being done on U.S. allies, South Korea and Hungary and the Israelis are among them, including potential spying on the Ukrainians themselves. There was some bits and pieces from these documents that definitely show a picture that U.S. intelligence is far more privy to top secret Russian information than probably the Russians believed. There was advanced intelligence reports in there that the U.S. essentially knew ahead of time some of the targets that the Russians were going after in Ukraine before they were going after it. And there was a couple reports in there, and this thing came out in like late February, but the reports were suggesting targets that the Russians were looking to hit in specific dates in March. So there's a good chance that some or potentially a lot of these missile strikes that the Russians are carrying out inside of Ukraine are basically hitting empty warehouses. At least some of them, because the West is aware of a number of targets ahead of time, and basically they intercept this stuff in phone calls and communications between Russian defense ministries. So that's not the kind of information that the U.S. would want the Russians to know. And like I said, I didn't give you guys anything specific there, so I don't think there's anything about this that should upset anyone or should censor anyone, because a lot of people have already seen this exact intelligence. And there was also a document, and this was probably the worst one in terms of like oh shit, uh the kind of thing you don't want the Russians to know. But it was a map of Ukrainian air defense, not only a map of their air defense coverage, but a projection map of what their air defense coverage would look like in April and May, when they started running out of missiles. And there was numbers of exact missile stocks of different types of air defense missiles for whether it's S-300, SA-8, SA-10, SA-11, all the medium and long range systems that Ukraine uses to protect its airspace to shoot down these, whether it's Russian jets or Russian cruise missiles. The Russian strategic bombing campaign against Ukraine has had far greater effect than we could have imagined from uh, just reporting on these events here. When this entire time it seems like everyone's been talking about how Russia is going to run out of cruise missiles. Ukraine is actually nearly out of the air defense missiles. So this document essentially said that as April and May rolled around, the Russian Air Force would be more and more active inside of Ukraine and more lethal in hitting targets, because there essentially would be nothing to stop them. Like a lot of these systems, and I'm not going to give specific numbers, but a lot of the systems, it seemed like there was more launchers available than there were missiles to fill those launchers up. So like if a Buck missile system can hold 4 missiles, a lot of these things probably only had 1 or 2 missiles sitting on the rack, and once they used them up, they were done. Essentially, and that's what I got from the intelligence report. So definitely information that the Ukrainians would not want the Russians to have. And that's not all doom and gloom, though, because there was a plan, and obviously has been a plan for a couple months now, to replace these Ukrainian air defense systems with IRSTs, with NASAMs, with Patriots that are slowly moving into the country. But it doesn't seem like there's going to be enough of them to provide the same kind of coverage that was there before. So this is the kind of stuff that the Russians can easily test out in terms of one of the statements in the document was after 2 more mass missile assaults, the Ukrainians would be completely out of air defense. If you're the Russians, you're going to want launch 3 or 4 more assaults and see if the third and the fourth have a higher level of effect on hitting their targets, right? So and this is not, I'm not giving the Russians any kind of information here. This comes from documents that were shared on pro-Russian Telegram channels and stuff. They already they've already seen them. So I think I'm not doing anything wrong by talking about them, if you ask me. But yeah, it produces a concerning picture for Ukraine. It also, it produces a concerning picture for Russia in a lot of ways as well. That Russia's not exactly being executing the war very competently. There's some truth behind that when American officials make these statements. For sure, they might be somewhat exaggerated and political in a lot of different ways, but um, you know, it definitely seems like the Russians are taking on more casualties and do have a lot more failings than they generally will admit in the war. But I'm not going to go too much deeper into the documents. Like maybe someday, like if like if the documents make it around so much, or like after the war's over and people start sharing the documents again, like perhaps someday like that we can dive into them, because there's a lot of interesting stuff to go through and break down with them. But at the moment, I'm just like, I am an American citizen. While I don't necessarily condone everything that our government does, I'm not going to um, you know help with uh, help with the sharing of potentially very damaging information. But everything I've told you in this video is things that have already been gone over by other news sources and stuff. So I'm just giving you my view of it, and what it means for the Ukrainian conflict. All right, guys, that's it from me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.